Welcome to today's New England Himss webinar, Leading Virtually with Empathy, presented by Laura Marquez, Assistant Vice President of IT Applications at UConn Health. All lines are muted upon entry, so please send your questions via the Q&A feature and we'll answer them at the end of today's session. Laura is a transformational leader committed to bringing out the best in people by tapping into their strengths. She believes when organizations recognize their most valuable asset, their employees, then leaders can change the culture to be rich, inviting, and inspiring. Laura has worked her way up from the bottom, performing each job along the way, which has broadened her perspective and strengthened her appreciation for what people do day in and day out. Laura is now the Assistant Vice President over IT Applications at UConn Health. This has given her a rewarding opportunity to apply all she has learned throughout her journey and to put ideas into action to positively affect change. Please join me in welcoming Laura today.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining and taking some of your lunch hours, or maybe it's the morning time for you. I understand that we have folks from coast to coast today joining. So I'm so delighted to have you. And today I think you're going to find it to be really informative. So hopefully at the end of the session, you'll take a few things away and have some great ideas for action that you and your teams can put into place. So today I'm going to be talking about several different things. Our learning objectives for today, I have to lay some ground rules of emotional intelligence. I think when we think of empathy, everything today that I'm going to take you through really lies in making sure that you have a broadened sense of EI and for your teams as well. We're going to talk about the unspoken rules and what those are, and you'll learn about how you could develop those at your own organization and put them into place. And then we are going to talk about strengths and really how to identify your teammates' strengths and how you could play to those strengths so that you could see the best in people. Then we're going to talk about feedback and how you can gather feedback and take action on feedback and what that really looks like. We'll also talk about communication and building some standards around communication, including things like team norms. And then lastly, we're going to end with talking about rounding and how rounding with your staff and inviting them in can create a great culture for folks to bring forward concerns. So I welcome you to put, like Alisa said, put questions in the Q&A. I'll take those all at the end. So keep them rolling. You know, you don't have to wait for those to type those in at the end. All right. So I'd like to open up with a quote, and this is from Ken Robinson. The role of a creative leader is not to have all the ideas. It is to create a culture where everyone can have ideas and feel that they're valued. So what I'm taking you through today is a collection of my own experiences, what I've learned. I've worked for some great organizations, and I've had excellent bosses. I've also had bosses that might not be as excellent, but I've always learned something from them. So I wanted to do this presentation today to really think about how we as leaders can create an environment and change the culture to be more welcoming, inviting, and trusting. And so empathy really at its core is all about people management and understanding how people show up. And when we can really lean into some of those vulnerable moments, we understand each other at the human level. And so when I think about my own journey throughout my career, it's interesting because I never used to be into like the water cooler chat. I was someone who had a hard time listening into coworker stories about their weekend plans or maybe their funny cat stories. I was all about the business. And about a decade ago, a powerful boss stopped me in my tracks and said, Laura, you are never going to climb the ladder by stepping on others. And this really, really resonated with me, and it struck me. Why was I being so rigid, so business? Why was I willing to sacrifice that human connection for the work? And that's really when I turned my thinking around. And so over the last decade, I've really been focusing on improving my own emotional intelligence, my own situational awareness, and then broadcasting that out throughout my teams and helping other people grow so that we can create a trusting environment and strengthen bonds. So let's start by talking about some foundational skills of EI. So there's 5 main components that make up emotional intelligence. So let's start with self-awareness. This is really, do you know how you are being perceived? When you speak, when you write an email, how does it land? Does your intent come across? You know, we all have been there where there might be, especially in this virtual world, an email that gets sent and it's read completely wrong. It wasn't how you intended it to come across. And we have to be thinking about how we, in our written and oral communications, do we know how we are perceived? And through someone else's lens, would our intent match the perception? Then there's motivation. So part of EI is really thinking about what type of influencer are you? What does your energy look like? Do you have a positive attitude? So as leaders, you want to lead by example, and people are motivated by those who have a positive outlook. So be thinking about, what level of motivation, what brings you joy? When you're showing up to work, what does that look like? And then there's empathy, which is kind of woven throughout this whole talk today. And this is really understanding what are the needs of my people? What are my own emotions? How do I perceive other people's emotions? And can I anticipate needs? Do I hear unvoiced questions? That's really the core of empathy. And then social skills. So social skills in terms of inclusiveness as well. Are we making sure that we are reflecting on both, our introvert and extrovert sides? We all have different communication styles. So those play into social skills of how you interact with people. How is your relationship building capabilities? And then lastly, self-regulation. So we all have the reptile brain where we might be quick to react. And self-regulation in the terms of EI is really pausing, being able to slow down and not react, not use that reptile brain and really slow down and maybe even walk away and pause for a little bit before responding or replying to an email or a Skype message, whatever that might be. Do you have that ability to self-regulate and give yourself pause? The next slide, I like to show kind of a dichotomy here of low and high EI. So what I'd like you to do is look through this list and really do some self-reflection in the moment. Where do you lie? What words stand out to you? And how would you rate your own emotional intelligence? So I'll name a few. So people with low emotional intelligence are often, can be very demanding and bossy. They could be selfish. Maybe they're not the best listener. They could be, a little passive, maybe even passive aggressive. They are hard to please. Versus someone with high emotional intelligence, they are able to make decisions and are assertive, but they are also warm and inviting. They have display a lot of patience, and they are good listeners, and they are approach things in a systematic way. So be thinking about, your own emotional intelligence, and I encourage you to tap into how you could continue to improve that. We can all grow. We all have blind spots. And as leaders in an organization, bring this back to your team as well, because, our staff need to know how they land, how are they being perceived? How are their social skills? How's their ability to self-regulate? And if we could continue to improve and build each other's EI, overall, the team will become stronger. So let's talk more about how you show up. So in this virtual world, I want to be in a place where I don't have to apologize for my dog barking in the background. I want to have more walking meetings versus being on the computer all day. And so, we all have good days and bad days. And I think what's important is on good days, we shine that positive light and people are drawn to that great energy. But on bad days, we also need to, take action and really kind of do something different. And maybe that is changing our schedule, because we need to give ourselves some space and some grace. And I think we can all appreciate, and you guys are on a Zoom call right now, there is such thing as Zoom fatigue. It's real. And we have to recognize that. So I want to introduce you to some okay statements, which are called the unspoken rules. So it's okay to say you don't understand. It's okay to ask teammates for help. It's okay to have quiet days. It's okay to ask why and why not. It's okay to actively solicit feedback. Don't wait for it. It's okay to not know everything. It's okay to ask management for help or to escalate issues. It's okay to not check email after hours. I mean, that's a huge thing, right? We've blended work and life. We're working from within our own homes. So, it's okay not to be working 24/7. I actually think organizations are getting a real bang for their buck, because without that commute, we're probably working more. We're logging on earlier or staying on later. So be thinking about, how work life integrates. And it's not really a balance anymore. It's an integration. So find ways to put some guardrails up on either side. It's okay to take a mental health day. It's okay to block off no meeting time on your calendar so you could have some clear, focused work time. It's okay to ask questions, lots of questions. It's okay to turn your video off if you need a break. It's okay to shift hours earlier or later to take care of family commitments. It's okay to make space to concentrate. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to follow up with people to help projects stay on task. It's okay to ask for patience. It's okay to take time off. It's okay to make a meeting a walking meeting. And it's also okay to help prioritizing your work. So these are called the unspoken rules. So I took these statements and did a full presentation to the department, letting the entire team, over like 150 people, know that it's okay to do these things or take action. And so the unspoken rules, it's our chance to get these out in the open. Why should these be kept in the dark? And I want to tie this back to our own employee motivation and understanding. So, let's see. Let me get this, push that, there we go. All right, so we've all seen this iceberg. It's a picture that has been used in a variety of ways, but for here, it's really a motivational iceberg where people intrinsically have both an intrinsic and extrinsic view of what they're motivated by. And the unspoken rules really help this lower iceberg, what's below the water, right? If you are setting these clear expectations, it's a whole new level of understanding that you've just been able to share and acknowledge, and those employees then understand, okay, I can set boundaries. I can block off time. I can, not be checking email after work versus feeling like it's this constant gerbil race. So saying the unspoken rules is really important for organizations. Setting those expectations, amongst your leadership team and then sharing them. And really be thinking of excellence, not perfection, because during this unprecedented time, it is different. We have to navigate and flex and bend in order to meet our workforce where they're at. And so be thinking about your performance, your performers, and not only your own, but how your staff are showing up. There's going to be people who are really thriving in the telework environment, but there's going to be other people that this is really a struggle for. So how can you maybe have a variety of meetings to meet both those types of needs? Maybe it's a mix of meetings that are, very agenda focused versus meetings that are more brainstorming and having more of the socialization aspect to it. So be thinking about how you can have a nice mixture of both intrinsic and extrinsic types of motivators. I did the Simon Sinek Find Your Why. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but I did one of those online classes, and my why statements that I wanted to share today is this third bullet on the slide, where my why is to invite people in and raise them up so that everyone can do their best. That's really my driver. Like, that's what brings me joy, is really seeing the best in people. So let's talk about how we could do that and how we can build teams based on strengths. So Don Clifton, he's an author, and he has done over 40 years of research with Gallup, and he has created an online assessment, and it is called the Strength Finder. And this is something that I was introduced at my last organization and have brought it forward, and just, it's such a thrill and a joy to do with our teammates. So actually, this was, we knew that from saving some cost savings that we had from not sending our staff to a presentation, we knew that we could leverage some of those extra dollars and actually purchase an ebook for all of our staff. So we did that. And what is this book all about? So Don Clifton categorizes it into, I think there's 34 different unique strengths. And really, he asks the question, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every single day? And chances are you don't. Often, the natural strengths that you have go untapped. And a lot of society focuses on weaknesses. And, what he's proposing is we flip that around and let's focus on strengths. Let's make sure that we are playing to those strengths by assigning people projects or tasks that naturally align with those strengths. Or perhaps we invite them to meetings where their strengths will be showcased. Someone who might not normally be invited to a meeting, that might, be a brainstorming session or potentially a strategic planning session. If you could identify folks who fall into those different domains of strengths, then you can have an even more, creative solutions unfold, and that's the real joy of a team, right? We can increase our diversity of thought. We can really raise each other up. We can hear, unvoiced folks come to the table and bring forth new ideas. So here's some statistics. So this is really interesting. So people who do use their strengths are 6 times as likely to be engaged on the job. Teams that focus on strengths have a 12.5% higher productivity. Employees who regularly apply their strengths are 5 times as likely to strongly agree that they know what's expected of them. And employers who receive strength-based feedback from managers have much lower turnover rates to the tune of almost 15%. So that's pretty compelling. So I sent the ebook out to all of the staff. So we had around 100 folks take the online strengths assessment. And then we've been breaking it down team by team and doing this great Strength Finder activity where we share. So I want to take a moment and share with you what we did amongst the teams. So UConn Health is an Epic shop. Our electronic health record is Epic. So for any other organizations who are joining her on Epic, you'll notice the tabs at the bottom. You'll be familiar with the various team names that are coincide with Epic's modules. But what you're looking at is the directors page. So this is the layout of the Clifton strengths. And so down the left-hand side, you have all the different strengths, and then you have your people across the top. And the Strength Finder identifies your top 5 strengths. So we put it into this Excel spreadsheet. Then you could see how each strength corresponds to one of 4 domains. So the 4 domains are executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. So executing, these are your drivers. These are the people who are going to get things done. That's a strength where, oftentimes it could be in line with an A-type person or someone who is, committed to seeing the end results and really can get the job done. Influencing this domain, these are the consensus builders. These are the ones who can really bring forth change, very good with brainstorming activities and being able to build consensus amongst each other and compete with each other in a friendly way. Relationship builders, these are our empaths. So these are the folks that really know how to connect with one another and really can help bring people together and often will share a common vision or goal and be able to align people around that. And then the strategic thinkers, these are the folks that are, able to see the 30,000 foot level and take folks, all the way to the finish line by seeing the bigger picture. They are able to anticipate, well, if we make this decision, we need to consider X, Y, Z, but if we do this route, we need to, do ABC. So it's really a neat activity because each team then has their own page and you're able to see the large pie and how people fall. And, so of the director group, you can see we have a pretty good split, which is great balance. The leadership team at UConn Health brings a lot of great balance. And then the other teams are across the bottom, and it's fun because now everyone gets to see each other's strengths as well. So if in the event that, maybe someone has, had a rub with a different staff member, they can go and look and see, okay, let me see what that person's top strength is. How can I maybe change my approach, to better interact with that person? Or how can we work better together knowing their strengths? So it's definitely a fun exercise. It's also neat because you're able to, use this type of a document where then you could, hide certain people and see then how you guys line up and oh, are we missing someone? Oh, we really need an influencer on this group. So let's bring in, someone else. All right. So now that we've talked about strengths, let's move into the feedback. So when I arrived at UConn Health, one of the first things that I wanted to do is understand kind of where are we at? Where's the baseline? And this ties in quite a bit with the next topic, which is the rounding topic. But I really wanted to know what's working well and what's not working well. So I sent out a survey, and I do have to say I was very surprised at some of the comments. But I think as leaders, what's important is we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. When we read answers that we don't want to hear, that we need to pay attention to those even more. And I think it's important. We took these back as a leadership team and reviewed them and really decided, how can we take some of these suggestions and make a positive change? And so I want to share some of the survey questions that I asked. It was just sent out through a Survey Monkey. Think about process improvement. What would you like to change? I wanted to really open it up to the ideas of our frontline staff. Again, I think part of empathy is understanding what people's needs are and hearing their ideas. And so being able to be open to ideas and experiment with each other's ideas is really what leads to success. Another question, I'm inspired to meet my goals at work. Strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree. I wanted to really know where people were at. I mean, do they even have goals? And I found out some teams had not set goals. So that was another exercise that we did that I'll talk about in a moment. What ideas do you have to improve our customer service? So in the IT department, we are a customer service department. We are there to serve our caregivers' needs and make sure that we're building solutions that work for our caregivers, which in turn will increase our patients' care. what changes with the department, what would you like to make? And what changes to make it go from, to give it a higher rating for best place to work? Like, what would that look like? And then, am I determined to give my best effort at work? Strongly agree to strongly disagree. And this was really important to sense a level of engagement. And then the two that were multi-select, where it was, in your opinion, which of the following do we do well? And then what do we need to improve? So these were the answer choices. And this helped us identify the top three of what we really needed to work on. One of which was recognizing strong performance. I think that a lot of teams they're working their tails off and they don't get that recognition that they deserve. Another one was making sure that we have a career development track. How can people see themselves advance? So that was really important. And we've actually taken that back to start looking at different job descriptions and how we can maybe make some changes there. So getting the answers, getting the results of such survey, let's talk about the feedback in general. So I like to call this the feedback staircase. So folks who are at the bottom of the staircase are more likely to deny a problem. What problem? There's no problem here. We're all great. But are you? Next would be the Defend Stair. And that's, where sometimes leaders or organizations can be quick to say, oh no, that's not a problem. You don't get it. They just don't understand. Then there's the Explain, where, okay, I recognize the problem, I understand the feedback, but there's a but. And we get stuck on that but and that following explanation of why. Then the next level is a better understanding. Okay, I see what they're trying to say here. That's great. But let's take it to the top. Change. Here's what I will do. And so naturally, feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, we have to be thinking about where do we fall on this staircase. And I think that's the best tip, piece of advice I have is anytime you receive feedback, whether it be from a survey, through a one-on-one, through an annual evaluation, where are you falling on that staircase? And give yourself a little bit of time to pause and digest that. Let's talk more about some other tips for feedback. Here's the do's. Do seek it on a regular basis. It really should not be reserved for an annual review. Feedback should be happening all the time. Seek it out. Ask your peers. Ask your management. Ask people outside of your organization for feedback. I think when you can increase the sphere of, to whom you're surrounded, you'll get a better dynamic view of yourself. View feedback as a gift. And I think I'd like to share that one of my mentors and my coach said it best. It's not feedback, it's feed forward. So what are you going to do with this gift? Like, how are you going to take this suggestion or change and move it forward? And be open to what you're going to hear. Ask for specifics. I think oftentimes if feedback is too generalized, we need to stop and ask for specific examples and clarify, what alternative would they have liked to see? Because maybe that's a learning opportunity where you can learn something new or how to do something differently. Be sure to be monitoring your nonverbal and emotional responses. Remember, we talked about that reptile brain. And so be thinking about, your own reactivity and both in your nonverbal and verbal response. Do use feedback to clarify goals and track progress to the goals and to improve the effectiveness of your behaviors. So we all have blind spots. And, so it's really, feedback is truly a gift to better understand how can we improve? And we should all be here to help each other and be willing to share that feedback. And if we could continue to broaden our understanding and increase our empathy for one another, then trust, this is a natural foundation for us to have trusting teams. And these types of conversations will flow much more naturally. Some don'ts for receiving feedback. Don't take it personally. Remember that your actions, they're interpreted through someone else's lens and their own life experiences. Sometimes we have to leave feedback at the door, so try not to personalize it. Some of it, leave it at the door. Don't become defensive or explain your behavior. So remember that feedback staircase, that defending and explanation is in the middle. See if you could get to the top. Don't be afraid to allow for those pauses. And, that silence, even though it might be awkward, it gives you time to process. And it also gives the deliverer time to process as well. And then don't make excuses or try to explain your behavior. All right, so let's talk about some standards for communication. So throughout this virtual world, I think communication has become the utmost critical thing for leaders and staff to do for their teams. We no longer have the hallway conversations. We don't see each other, after meetings. We don't, get to go out to lunches. And so how can we communicate and be more transparent? So transparency. One of the things that we've known is that people on virtual teams, they could feel displaced or out of the loop. And so I think it's important to establish regular communications or regular meetings, even if it's just a 15-minute huddle. And maybe that's how you kick off your Monday with a quick team huddle, and make sure everyone's on the same page. Any announcements, any, out of offices, anything that's upcoming, let's be transparent and continue to share it. When people feel out of the loop, this is what really can lead to perceptions of being treated unfairly or increase anxiety and fear. And so be thinking about, how are your staff handling the 100% virtual world? Or maybe your organization is now back to a hybrid model. And so, or maybe that's the route that your organization will take. But for those folks who are struggling, how can we best, meet them where they're at? And often it could either be, like I said, a 15-minute huddle, or maybe a standard communication with those updates. However you can continue to cascade information down, I think that's very important. Another idea is creating, I talked about consistency, but creating team norms. And so if you haven't done this already, it's not too late. When we became a virtual world, I think that we have an opportunity to pause and say, all right, let's get together as a team and create some norms. How are we, how often do we want to meet? How often should our team meetings be? How often should our department meetings be? How can we best communicate with our staff? Is it via email? Is it via, Skype or Microsoft Teams? How can we disseminate information and make people feel more included? One of the other team norms to consider is, how can you improve and increase your level of decision-making to include more frontline staff and really bring them into those conversations, and maybe even tap into the strengths of some of those folks who might be those strategic thinkers, and invite them into that conversation to help bring forward a change. If there is conflict, I think we really have to pause and make sure that it gets surfaced and it's not festering. So part of a virtual conflict is really, when you see those email exchanges going back and forth, I empower your staff to, put a timeout on that. Like, put a pause. Let's not go back and forth anymore. Let's huddle together, or let's take this as a separate meeting. Maybe management needs to discuss this, and then bring it back to the group. So be thoughtful about your responsiveness in email. Remember that reptile brain. Maybe sometimes it's good to take pause and not engage in something that might feel a little bit heated, and really think about, what is the solution here? What problem are we trying to solve? And let's collectively be a team and come up with a great solution. And I think that managing conflict, we really have to think about collaboration and negotiation. Let's challenge ideas, not people. I'm going to say that again. Let's challenge ideas and not people. We cannot personalize things. We have to give people the benefit of the doubt and understand that we are here to work as a team and be collaborative. The other idea for communication is creating some standards. So I am a huge fan of SBAR. As many of you in healthcare know, SBAR has been used in the nursing world for many, many, many decades. And so SBAR stands for Situation, Background, Assessment or Analysis, Recommendation. So each of those letters, I would strongly encourage, especially in written communication, when you're sending an email, especially if it's rolling up to a leader, or even if you're pulling someone new in, at least you might not use all 4 letters, but use some of them. So spell out the situation or even summary. What's the problem here? Like, what's the concise statement that we could share to especially for adding new people onto an email? Be courteous and not have to have them scroll down through 15 different threads back and forth to understand what's happening. I'm sure as a receiver, you could appreciate that. So be thinking about giving a little bit of a summary. But if you are rolling up an issue, what's the background? How did we get here? What information do we need to know that's related to that information or situation? And then assessment or analysis. So what did you discover? Like what do you think? Bring forward your ideas that might have come forth with some analysis. And then recommendation. So this is really, what do you want? And it could even be posed as a question. What does operations want given this information? Almost like a next step. So this has really improved communication in our department by standardizing the use of SBARs in email communication. And then for the Epic Shop side of the house, when the analysts open up what is called a Sherlock, which is a ticket directly with the vendor, we ask our analysts to use the same format so that our technical support team has a good description and can follow exactly the problem that the analyst is bringing forward. So I'd highly recommend that. Okay, so let's talk about rounding. So with your staff, I think it's really important to be checking in. And one of the best sentences that sticks with me is, checking in with staff is also checking your own ego at the door. So one-on-ones with staff should be happening frequently. It should, and this is where feedback can happen, but this is where relationships can really be strengthened. Rounding is an opportunity to see how people are doing, both in their personal lives, but professional lives too. Is there anything that we could do to support them? Is there anything, that they might need, whether it be, physical hardware, and problems connecting virtually, or is it something, that maybe there's a barrier or roadblock that we can help? One-on-one time is crucial to meet your staff and really give them space to bring forward any concerns. So Quint Studer, he is an author, and he's someone that really promotes rounding. And this screenshot is from a different consulting company, but I really liked the picture that it brings, where here's what rounding does. It improves staff engagement. You have a higher retainment of staff because there's an investment that you're making in them. It improves outcomes, so stronger quality of work, and better outcomes. Quality increases because people are engaged and they want to give it their best. Action plans can be created. And this doesn't have to be an employee performance action plan. This could be an action plan for a project. Ultimately, it's elevating the patient experience and enhancing communication. So in the IT world, we are the hands, behind the computer, but we are an extension of our care teams. And the work that you do is so critical to our patients that it's so important that you recognize what you do matters. So rounding, let's go back to building trust. Ask yourself these questions. Do people look forward to coming to work? Do they feel valued? Do they feel heard? Do they feel supported? Is the environment perceived as fair and just? These are the types of things that will come out during staff rounding. And you'll get, light will be shed. And that's when you could then take action on those things. But by giving space to employees, this will help promote trust and really build that foundation for creating excellence. The other thing that you should do with rounding with your staff is set goals. We need to focus on a common goal with collective responsibility. So how I like to lead my teams with goal writing is doing SMART goal writing. So something that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And so these SMART goals that we create, they actually build upon one another. So an analyst might have a certain goal, and then their manager might have a goal that is just one above it, that builds. And then that director is going to have, an all-encompassing goal that helps fuel, performance or, something, push us to the next level. And so it's this collective responsibility where we all have a part. It's a common purpose. And so goal setting should be happening during one-on-ones or, definitely at the annual mark. You should set goals for the year, but smaller goals can happen too. And I think that helps with clear expectations. When you set goals for staff and for our teams, they're inspired because they want to see that through and get that goal accomplished. Goal setting, very powerful. So think about that ideal state and motivating yourself to turn that vision into reality. And this helps with that emotional intelligence motivation piece too, because and a little bit of that friendly competition. Let's see how we could stretch people beyond their limits and really, get the best out of them. The physical act of actually writing goals down makes it real and tangible. And SMART goal writing really helps successful teams. They feel supported, and it'll improve your team performance. So I mentioned this earlier. So rounding is really checking in with people while checking your own ego at the door. Be there to listen. And listening, it's hard. It's hard to learn how to listen, but good leaders are good listeners. Create some virtual office hours. Create time on your calendar where anyone can pop in and call you or Skype you, and really be readily available to all levels, all lines of staff, because that helps really foster a sense of belonging. That's creating that space for them to lean in and be vulnerable. And when they do lean in and share, thank them, thank them for sharing. And I think you'll find that your relationships will grow and your teams will really become that much stronger. When we have a stronger culture of safety where people are trusting and people have each other's backs, the burnout rates decrease, and you have a stronger resilience of a workforce. And who doesn't want that, right? I mean, we all want to have strong teams. So coaching in your one-on-ones, also, this is a powerful picture to really be thinking about how can we improve our mindsets and how can we train up our staff. So thinking of some questions, when they're sharing an experience with them, ask them what they learned. What made them successful? What maybe are different strategies they could have used? Can you learn anything else? And really be thinking, thanking them, showing gratitude to them, and acknowledging it might have been tough, but they did it. And so those are powerful, inspirational words that will help continue to change to a growth mindset. So in your rounding, be thinking too that you are not only helping develop your staff, but you're a coach to them as well. And how can you grow them and make them flourish and tap into their strengths to see them perform their best? So the 7 C's to building a winning team. I love this quote. To build a strong team, you must see someone else's strength as a complement to your weakness and not a threat to your position or authority. So be thinking about coaching. What kind of character are you? How do you show up each day? What does your emotional intelligence look like? How is your communication? Are you being a transparent leader? Your commitment, are you showing, are you keeping good on your word? If after an end of the meeting, if you take an action item, are you following through on that? that builds trust and credibility. Having contagious energy, that's being that positive, beacon of light, and being a good role model for your team. And then caring. This is really the empath, right? Are you there for your people, and are you meeting them at their needs? And then consistency. So making sure that we are consistent in our actions and in how we show up. So empathy, we've talked about it throughout the presentation, broadening our understanding, leaning into those vulnerable moments, recognizing those challenging circumstances that people face. So that's something really important. In these unprecedented times, we might have a child who is remote learning from home. You might be taking care of a sick or loved one. You might be having financial hardships. We never know what people are going through. And someone might have had a really tough morning, and we need to appreciate that, they have, they're doing their best. We have to attribute positive intent. We don't know what's happening behind that virtual green screen. So we have to be kind. So we need to pivot to meet the needs. And I love this. No matter how educated, talented, or rich you are, how you treat people ultimately tells all. So in closing, be thinking about how are you building your culture of safety? Your team is only as strong as your weakest hiker. So what are you going to do to raise them up? Let's have widespread respect for colleagues' contributions. Let's challenge ideas and not people. Let's increase the diversity of thought. What can we learn from others? Who else should we invite to the table? And let's create an environment where challenges are welcomed. And let's ask the questions, what are we missing and what did we not consider? Just when we think something is buttoned up, let's make sure that we really think through and make sure we didn't miss any downstream impacts that we might have been blind to. Thank you.
So Laura, I got many compliments, an excellent presentation. And someone stated, the OKs are great, but I feel that they are dependent on corporate culture. We all need to be aware of culture that may be toxic. The leader needs to impact culture.
Yeah, great point. I couldn't agree more. And I think what's interesting is that as leaders, it's up to us to change the culture. So I think that, while maybe some organizations might not have flexibility in, hours, for example, maybe they don't have the ability to say, get your work done whenever you can, maybe that's not reality, but there's certainly many things that can be said. And then I would encourage you to work with your human resources department to discuss those things, because this is the next normal, right? All organizations are re-looking at their telework policies, and you could have a positive influence on that policy creation. And so don't be kept in the dark about that. Raise your concerns and bring forward your ideas to your HR department.
So the next also says, great talk. How do you share this culture outside of your department?
Yeah, great question. I'm in the new part of being an IT department leader, so I have not yet taken it to other departments, but certainly that's next in plan to really showcase some of these ideas that we've brought forward and showing to success. So next up on my list is to actually do a follow-up survey asking the same questions and comparing the data from what I sent out from last summer, and really seeing how have the impacts that, the things that we have changed and put into place, how has that resonated with our workforce? Are they sensing a stronger engagement? Have the changes that we've made been positive? So once I can look at some of that data, then I'll be bringing it forth to the other department heads and seeing if they'd like to do similar things. And I'd probably offer to do strength finder exercises for them if they wanted to make that commitment as well.
So the next question is, when you say rounding, is that joining patient clinical rounds or visiting with staff one-on-one?
Great clarification. So we're taking the idea of rounding from patients and bringing that into our own department, and it's staff rounding one-on-one. And it's an opportunity to meet with our staff either on a weekly basis or maybe, with the leads on a monthly basis, whatever that cadence might look like. It's really carving out time to meet with them, and not just to check off the boxes. And I think that's where rounding sometimes can be misinterpreted. Oh, I have to round with my staff. Let me just check off the boxes. Like, are you good? Yep. Okay, great. That's not what rounding is about. Rounding is really leaning in and seeing, how are your people doing? And asking, how can I, do you need help? Is there anything I could do differently to support you? And really just creating that space for them to bring forward anything to share.
So the next question is, have you had experience reporting back to the staff management team by showing the connection between the feedback and specific actions taken? And how was that received?
Yeah, a great example is with our change board. There was a lot of feedback that there was high administrative burden on what we were asking for our team in order to implement a build change. What they had to do for documentation was very laborious. It was lengthy, and for simple changes, that analyst was spending more time working on the documentation than they were actually on the build change. And that's just not effective. It's not a good use of valuable resource time. And so we took the suggestions. We actually then created a change board group to revisit the policy. And like I said, we invited people in, and it was driven by the various analyst teams, representation from all different teams who can share their thoughts and ideas. They collaborated, came to a consensus. Not everyone liked it, but they made a decision and moved forward, and they were able to make some great changes to reduce that administrative burden. Those types of changes have been very well received. And it's those small tests of change, right? Any process improvement, what can we tweak? Did it work? All right, let's make it stick. Maybe if it didn't work, revert back. Maybe we change something different. So being open and flexible to those ideas is really important as well.
So the next question is, how do you navigate engaging with other leaders in your organization who may not share your theory of listening? Because I love what you said about good leaders are good listeners. So very true.
Yeah, and the Strength Finder is a good example. So I have a team that is developers. They're DBAs. They're folks that are really behind the scenes. Great workers. And when I brought forth that I was going to do the Strength Finder, they're just like, who is this woman and what is she wanting us to do? And so I think asking people to give you a chance. And, so for those leaders who might not be in line with your own, vision or share that same trait, give them a shot, and maybe share things in a different way. I think that for, if there's a leader who might not be a good listener, share your own stories of what's been impactful and what's worked. Use I statements so they don't feel targeted, and I think that you can slowly help, bring forward some maybe examples by a shared experience and kind of, work it from that angle, or have a crucial conversation. That's part of the building a trusting environment, is that we need to also have a trusting leadership team. And so we all have blind spots. And one of the things that our leadership team is going to start doing next month in May is doing some 360s, and in our director level and AVP meetings, just go round robin. Each week we'll call on a different person to volunteer, and we'll say, okay, what blind spots, does so-and-so have, and or their team have, and be able to have open, crucial conversations with, hey, this didn't land quite well, can we talk about it? So I think it's just important to be open and honest.
Well, thank you very much, Laura, for taking the time to present to us and answer all the questions from our attendees. if everyone will take a moment to give your feedback, many accolades to you in the chat, Laura, today, that it was an excellent presentation. But the Zoom will be followed with a short survey. If you'll give Laura your feedback, that would be excellent. And the CP Himss credit will also be sent to all the attendees of today's session. And don't forget to register for our May virtual conference. The early bird registration closes on April 23rd, next Friday. So please keep an eye on that and register before that the price changes. Thank you again, Laura. We appreciate your time and all your information today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.